know, I think OBS or the fancier stuff is like $500 or.
I think OBS is
like
free.
Oh, is it free? Okay. Oh, that's the free
wrong.
one.
I haven't used it.
That's the free one, and then there's another one that's like $500, and I guess OBS, if you do some of the hard, tech work or figure it out on the front end, you can make it all work. All right, hey everybody on Facebook Live. So Ernest, this is going to be like Inception. We're going to record inside of a broadcast, and then we'll hit the recorder off. Don't say anything you wouldn't want your mama or your grandmama to say, because we'll still be broadcasting. Take any questions or comments that happen during the broadcast, and then we'll go offline and wrap things up over there. So
sounds like a plan.
Facebook Live, just let us know where you're watching from and say hi. And during the actual recording, which we're going to get into in just a moment because Ernest is ready to go, I unfortunately will not be acknowledging the comments during the recording time, but I'm happy to kind of plaster it here on the broadcast visual because I have a button that lets me do that. So that's
Perfect.
Always a lot of fun. All right. And Ernest can't see this, and neither can all of you here in Talk Universe Facebook world, but I've got all these spreadsheets here and layers on top of other layers, and it just looks like I'm wasting everybody's time, but really what I'm doing is sliding things around and whatnot. So thanks all for being super patient. We're going to get started here in just a moment. After I figure out what the heck okay, that was interesting. All right. Good deal. Return to analog, how to break the digital leash. Which TEDx was it, Ernest?
This was in TEDx Canmore.
Canmore, okay.
Which is a small mountain town in Alberta, Canada.
Oh, cool. Canmore. All right, in Alberta. I don't think I have anybody from Alberta yet. I always get to see my little stats on the map right there, and all the Albertans haven't jumped in like the Vancouver folks in the
right.
I think Saskatchewan, and then I've got over to the east, but I think there are a couple right there in the heartland that haven't tuned in yet. All right.
All right.
Well, cool. You ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock.
So am I. All right. We are live in 3, 2. We are live with Ernest Barbaric. Ernest, are you ready to talk?
I am always ready to talk.
Ernest Barbaric is a digital marketing strategist, educator, podcaster, and TEDx speaker. Ernest's work and projects have been featured in Forbes, USA Today, CBC, Global TV, and Canadian Business. Ernest works with forward-thinking brands and entrepreneurs on projects ranging from startup launches and strategy development to personal branding and executive coaching. Ernest Barbaric, welcome to the talk.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for it.
Well, your recent TEDx Canmore talk is called Return to Analog, How to Break the Digital Leash. And I think this is going to be a great talk for my wife to appreciate, that she can remind me of, because I definitely, this is the funny thing. We're in concurrent digital leashes right now because we're doing a Facebook Live and we're doing a podcast recording, but we're going to take that with a grain of salt. Take us behind the talk. I know the most valuable resource we have is our attention and our time, and you start out the talk with that, so please take us behind the talk, Ernest.
So I'll tell you a little bit about the background of it, I guess. So really where it came from, I'm a digital marketing strategist, so I work in this field. And so I've noticed that over the last couple of years, I've noticed that it was starting to, because I've been in the field, I kind of understand what's happening behind the scenes from a marketing perspective. And I also noticed that it wasn't making me feel great to be connected to all these digital devices all the time, and specifically our phones, right? So I started doing some more research into it, and then with the background in digital marketing, I did a lot of psychological research, and I read a lot of studies, and I found that there are a few different things that were happening. And so one is we are experiencing higher levels of anxiety and depression and that kind of stuff. And I think part of the reason that's contributing to that is our reliance on these digital devices that is coming to the point of addiction. And so that's where this talk came from.
Yeah, for sure. And you've got the whole laundry list of the dopamine and the, all the different chemicals that as marketers, I'll include myself in there just because I'm a podcaster as well. And so we want people to listen. And so marketing is just putting out value-added content and value-added services for people, but it's gone a little bit haywire. And I think maybe where it comes into the chemical releases and the triggers and the engineering of all that. So that's all I'm going to say. I'd love to hear your opinion on that, Ernest.
Yeah, well, so the interesting thing is, so there's a few different studies, and by this point in time, I think the numbers are a little bit higher. So there was an average person touches their phone about 2,617 times a day, and that was a study done by D-Scout, as well as there's a number of other studies on that as well. And for a higher heavy user, such as, for example, probably the two of us and the folks that might be listening to this, we click, tap, or swipe our phones close to 6,000 times a day. And so that's a weird thing to think about, but that's essentially what we have, this motor memory now to just keep checking for things. And so the thing that I found the most interesting is it was just thinking about that. And the reason why I did the talk in the first place was I noticed it was starting to make me feel less happy, less engaged, and less focused with my real life. For example, my family, my daughter, the different responsibilities that I have, like, for example, my writing, my podcasting, and so on and so forth. And so there were a few things that when I started doing research that I came across. But the simplest way to kind of think about it is that what happens is that these devices, the apps, they are engineered essentially in a way to make you feel good about using them. So just to give you an example, so essentially, I talked about the brain chemicals, and I think there's a big body of research in regards to this, and it focuses on neurotransmitters. So basically, the idea is behind something like this. So your dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin are chemicals that make you feel love, happiness, and joy. Dopamine specifically happens when you discover something new. Oxytocin happens when there's some kind of a connection between you and another person, and serotonin is when you're recognized for something. So this is from a different body of research that I didn't talk about in the TEDx talk. And so what happens is that every time you experience that, you feel motivated to want more of those kind of feelings. And so the way that some of our digital devices are engineered, and some of the apps are engineered in such a way that they make us feel motivated to more of that. So Candy Crush is an old example, but you can apply that to Twitter, to Facebook, to almost any kind of an online device. Essentially what happens is when something new happens, for example, you unlock a new level of Candy Crush, or you get some kind of a new notification from someone, you post a photo and someone likes it, anything like that, you kind of get this small hit of dopamine. And so what happens is, because it's something new, and it might actually trigger into oxytocin and serotonin depending on what kind of interaction it was. And so what happens, if you check your email before going to sleep, you get a hit. If you unlock a new level of Candy Crush, you get a hit. You post a photo, someone likes it, you get a hit. And with every single one of those interactions, especially if it unlocks some kind of new content or some kind of a new thing as a result of you doing some kind of an action, you get this tiny fountain of joy that floods your brain. And so what happens is that we're essentially doing something called operant conditioning, where it means that with every single one of those interactions, you get a stimuli, such as, for example, a little red dot, and you check it, and you're rewarded by it. You get a stimuli such as somebody texted me, and you get a reward knowing that somebody texted you. And so what ends up happening is that the stimuli, reward, you end up creating a compulsion loop. And that grows in strength the more you reinforce it. And so there's something called myelination that happens inside of your brain, which is reinforcement of neural pathways. And so this is where it's a very similar type of a thing that happens to people that are addicted to cocaine, for example, because of the constant really good feelings. And so this is why we have people that can't stop using their phones while they're driving, or at the gym, or at the dinner table. And those people,
not you or me.
Definitely, I can say I am absolutely 100% guilty of this, and even now, having done the talk, and even having done a detox and all this kind of stuff, I still find myself doing that. But I have more of a consciousness around it, and I try to limit that kind of usage. And it's the same kind of behavior you see with nicotine and heroin addicts. And so that's essentially where this compulsion comes from. And you might be aware of it already, but there is, I think it's a Center for Humane Use of Technology. There was a couple of ex-people from Silicon Valley that just founded this organization, which is essentially to decouple the addictive parts of technology from our everyday lives. And we're also seeing some of this roll out, and for example, a new iOS updates that was just announced at the Apple conference, where there's certain limitations they can put in terms of your phone usage. So we're seeing some of these changes actually now transfer into the mainstream in terms of combating some of this addictiveness.
Well, that's news to me. So there's a new Center of Humane Use of Technology, and
I believe that's what it's called. I'll have to look it up.
They're going to put parental controls that the parental part of you can set on yourself. It sounds like in the I don't know what else to call it, but timeout, the timeout
basically
chair.
Right? and it's interesting because we have such a compulsion. What I've noticed, so I did a couple of interesting things, I guess, experiments of myself, where I took a week off from TV news and social media, and it was really hard for the first 3 days. But then the amount of work that I was able to crunch through in those 7 days was incredible. And by the end of it, I didn't want to kind of sail right back into it. Now, a few months later, I'm right back into the mix, but I'm now trying to find some kind of a smarter way to balance between the two. I find it so easy to get sucked in.
Well, it is. And how do you get out when you're in? And how do you, and really for your life and for my life, when this is livelihood, how can you explain that to me? You can bring me up to speed, Ernest, because you're making a living in the digital space, teaching people how to set boundaries between them and the digital work that they do also in the digital space. So what can I and Talk Universe do to set those boundaries where we still have to use this stuff to make a living from it?
Sure. So I'll tell you about a couple of different practices that I've started using, and specifically, so I did this. So before I get into that, I did this 1 week off from all digital kind of things. What I had to do for work, for example, using like Word doc or something else like that, I did, which was fine, but it was no social media, no TV, no news of any kind, and that was a really interesting experience. I came out of it, I think, with some really interesting insights. But coming back to some of the things that we can do, I think that the biggest thing that happens with folks that are in this space like us is that we're distracted quite a bit. I think you have to have a really incredible, strong mental fortitude in order to, for example, not open up a new tab. So one of the things that I found myself doing when I was doing that week off experiment is my fingers would just kind of do this, and I would open up I was Command TT to open up new tabs, for example, for Facebook, Twitter, and that kind of stuff. And I caught myself just doing that out of pure muscle memory. So one of the things that we can do is to remove some of those distractions. And now, if possible, one of the things that I started doing is I would set these 2-hour work blocks where the phone would go off, you would put your phone on airplane mode, block out the time on your calendar, and then you can either exercise your control not to open a new tab and start, getting sucked into Facebook or email or whatever else. But there's also a couple of apps. So for Mac, there's one called Self-Control, or if you use Chrome, there's one called Stay Focused, which is a similar functionality. So essentially it blocks off all of these different, so it's essentially a blocker. And one of the ways to think about this is if you are working on something important, to take a 2-hour time block, which almost anyone can do. The world is not going to explode in 2 hours, fingers crossed. So just set that time away for yourself to move the needle in a project. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, if there is an opportunity to disconnect, would be another one. So, for example, if you're sitting across the table from your family or from a business meeting or something else like that, to turn the phone off, because it's constantly, like, even if it's on silent, it's still going to have the screen is going to light up and you're still going to see notifications. So turn the phone off if anyhow possible. Put it on airplane mode, or at least put it somewhere out of sight so you can actually focus on the person that you're trying to connect with. And So just moving the distraction out of sight is one of the ways that you can create some of that space to get some of your focus and attention back. And finally, the other thing that I found interesting was that for myself, and this is also similar to a lot of entrepreneurs and business professionals that I've spoken to, because there's such a compulsion to keep checking things, you need to overpower it with something different. So it's almost like trying to find ways to create these immersive experiences that allow you to step out of your own head, one of the ways to think about it. So, for example, when I was younger, I used to train in mixed martial arts, and so I remember I had a really stressful job at the time. And so when you would, spar with someone and we would get onto the mats, right? We do jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and that kind of stuff. You can't really think about, I should have done this. I should have checked my email. I should have replied that, because you're going to get punched in the face. So over the years, I've kind of taken that thinking and looked for different ways that are a little bit less physically intensive. So, for example, a hike in the mountains is a really great way to do that. I've also started some urban sketching, so I'll do watercolors, and I find that those types of things that take more of your senses. And there's a lot of research behind this. The more of your senses that you use to do something, the more resources your brain dedicates to it. So you have less resources dedicated to being distracted or to your compulsions. So these immersive experiences are another really great way to kind of to battle some of this addiction that we have.
All right, Talk Universe. Did you catch that? The last one was multi-sensory experiences, like taking your shoes off and walking with your dog down by the river like I can do. The other thing is just simple social media blockers and blocking out time, 2-hour blocks of time as well. We've been enjoying this talk with Ernest Barbaric of TEDx Canmore. His talk has been called Return to Analog, How to Break That Digital Leash. And we're going to be back with Ernest in just a moment for the Blitz Round. And we're back for the Blitz Round. I'm going to ask Ernest a couple of quick questions related to the preparation and performance of his recent branded talk. Are you ready, Ernest?
I'm ready.
All right. Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
I think I would call myself a blender, but for TEDx specifically, I tried to memorize the whole thing because I didn't want to miss a sentence. My talk was 12 minutes long. I shortened it, so I tried to kind of hit everything, which didn't quite happen looking back at it, but blended, I think, is where I sit naturally.
How did that serve you, the memorization for this?
You know, I did so many revisions so we had a talk, I think, on Saturday, and on Thursday I rewrote it completely, and so I had one day to memorize everything, and it went pretty well, I would say, in terms of how many things I remembered.
I couldn't tell that you rewrote the whole thing and memorized it in a day. It looked pretty good.
Well, I was so self-conscious about everything, and there's this, I feel like there was this such pressure to speak, at a TEDx anything, that was probably the most high-stakes talk that I've given, even though, I've spoken at conferences of 1,500, 2,000 people about marketing and that kind of stuff, and this was a room about 120 people. I still felt the stakes were way higher for some reason.
Well, and it's a branded talk, and so with branded talk like Idea City or regular TED or Q Ideas or Google Talks, the idea is worth spreading, and it is exalted above you and I as normal consultants and speakers. I mean, normally a nice keynote, and it's Ernest or Nathan or put in your name in there, and this is different because the idea really has to stand apart. So that may have something to do with it. What's a tip, technique, or a tool that helped you, Ernest?
So one of the most important things that I found, so I read a lot of these TED books, Talk Like TED. There was one I think called TED Talks by Chris Anderson. And so one of the things that helped me out the most was actually doing a trial run. So I put together a talk, and then I invited a few of my friends, and then I did a dry run, which then completely changed my entire talk. And I think it was better as a result.
When was the dry run? Was that pretty close to the actual talk, or was it a little farther back, or?
It was about 3 to 4 weeks out.
Oh, good. Okay.
Because I thought in my mind I was going to be like, I'll run this and I'll fine tune it. But what I ended up doing is I ended up rewriting about 17 times since then.
Well, and then the day before, or 4 days before, in a complete rememorization. Wow. Okay. Well, besides that, my last question to you is: what was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
So I don't know if there was anything really unexplained. I think so. One of the interesting things that happened is that there was some audio issues, and so our MC had the one kind of a microphone, and all of the speakers had a different kind of a microphone. But the microphone was making these noises, so they didn't transfer really well. And so 2 minutes before I stepped on stage, I asked if I could use the MC's microphone. And that just worked out really, really well. And then everybody else after I spoke used the same microphone.
I want what he's using.
that was a super lucky thing. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that as part of my talk, I actually embedded a ringtone inside of my presentation, and it was a ding.
Yeah, it was like the Pavlovian response. It was brilliant.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to trigger people so they can see what it's actually like. And so the thing was, when I was talking to one of the technicians that was getting ready to go, I said, this needs to be at this exact volume, but we couldn't test it because people were already in there. So that was it just happened to have worked out, and I'm so very grateful for that tech that dialed in the right sound.
Yeah, you were lucky, and the tech gods were definitely smiling on you that day, Ernest. We've been enjoying the Blitz Round with Ernest Barbaric. He's a digital media strategist, and his recent talk is called Return to Analog, How to Break the Digital Leash. If you want to check that out, you can go to our show notes page. If you don't want to type it out into YouTube, you can go to bethetalk.com. We're going to have a link right there. And you can also connect with Ernest at his website, Ernest Barbaric, Barbaric.com, ErnestBarbaric.com. And we're going to be right back with Ernest in just a moment for the final word of advice. And we're back with the final word of advice with Ernest Barbaric to you, Talk Universe.
In terms of speaking,
takeaway, yeah, whatever.
So one of the things since 2013, I've started researching meaningful work. So this is something that I'm actually preparing to potentially pitch as my next TEDx talk. And one of the things that was consistent across every single person who feels fulfilled by what they do is that they always do work in service of others. And so the way that I would translate that in terms of if you wanted to do a TEDx talk or something else like that, think about the fact that how is this going to make an impact and who am I actually serving with this talk? I think that's one of the things that I've definitely taken away from the last few years of research.
Ernest Barbaric, thank you so much for carving out a few minutes in your valuable schedule and giving your advice to Talk Universe today.
Thank you so much for having me. I thought it was great.
All right, that's a wrap. Now, we're still recording in the Facebook Live. Fun interview. Got a couple of thumbs up. All right. Ernest will be checking out this thread. So if this isn't live anymore and you still want to ask a question, go ahead and do that. It's a very rare chance to ask somebody a free question, the people that I bring on here. And I never clear it with people before I bring them on. So I'm expecting to see a couple of invoices in the mail. The more I
no. Look, I'm happy to talk. The thing that I was going to mention too, as a result of all this, I actually started building a retreat for entrepreneurs and professionals.
Oh, cool!
So it's going to be a 3-day retreat to actually to disconnect and think. And then one day I was out with my dog actually in the mountains, and I came up with this tagline: "Stop, breathe, think." And that's the tagline that we're going to run this with. So as a result of all of this research that I've done and the TEDx talk and all that kind of stuff, I'm actually putting into action to help other people. So I'm more than happy to hop on and answer any questions.
Well, that's going to be a very popular retreat, and that's also going to be a very popular retreat for significant others to be sending people like me to. So
right.
I think I'll be seeing you pretty soon, Ernest.
That sounds great. We'd be happy to have you.
Maybe I'll bring Cole if she's still up for it. She my dog. My podcast buddy is my little Karelian bear dog. She turned 11 today.
Nice. So, I have my pit bull actually right underneath the desk right now.
Yeah.
She's snoring away, so hopefully you can't hear most of it.
No, you must have a good limiter gate because I don't hear any snoring at all. I got my limiter for the exact same reason. She's hacking logs over here half the time. All right. Hey, everybody. We will catch you later, and we're going to catch up offline. Thanks so much for tuning in today.
That sounds great. Have a great afternoon.